I do want women to know that there is an alternative to suppressing their bodies with hormones, that they can see their body as a good and they can live in that body holistically.
Totally. Oh my gosh. It's amazing.
Join co-hosts Jamie Rocci and Teresa Kenny as they educate women about the beauty of the feminine design and empower women to take charge of their health.
They're going to be so amazing. You're going to be so empowered by understanding your feminine genius and your hormone genius. I don't think I could live my whole life knowing this and not sharing it with anyone. Hey everyone, and welcome to the Hormone Genius Podcast. I personally have been waiting for this interview for weeks, and dare I say maybe a couple months. I'm so excited to have Dr. Mariza Snyder on with Teresa and us today. I was sharing with Dr. Mariza that I've been a fangirl of hers for years. I've been a fangirl, and I showed her the book. I have it my key books that I reach for in front of my computer if I just need to reference something or whatever, and hers is one of them, the Essential Oils Hormone Solution. So those of you who have followed us long enough know that, we love natural support tools to manage symptoms of hormone imbalance and to care for the body. Essential oils is one of those things. So that's like a key reference. But today we are going to be talking about perimenopause with Dr. Snyder. So her focuses are on functional wellness, and she's an author of books. She's very widely known, has a huge following. Your podcast, I think, is called Energized with Dr. Mariza Snyder. More than 17 years of clinical practice. And just a real expert in this area of women's health. And especially today, we'll be talking, like I said, about perimenopause. So welcome to our show.
Thanks for having me. I'm so happy to be here this morning.
Yes, we're so excited. Okay, so Dr. Snyder, perimenopause is a hot topic.
Yes.
And
finally.
At last, it's like that stone that hasn't been turned over yet in society, And so you're helping us turn those stones over. So we're going to just jump right in. Why is this topic of perimenopause crucial for women right now, this day and age, in regards to the relationship they have with themselves, with their bodies? So let's start there. Why is understanding perimenopause so important?
Your perimenopause for many of us is an initiation. It's a portal into the second, what I consider to be the most powerful chapter of our lives. But it's also a neuroendocrine transition where our brain is remodeling and our entire body, not just our brain, right? And it shows up as signs and symptoms. And it's important that we understand, so often when we're experiencing symptoms during perimenopause, we can be quick to blame ourselves and to shame ourselves. And I think it's important for women to know that they are not broken, that their bodies are going through a profound hormone shift, one of the three biggest hormone shifts that women go through in their lifetime. And with the right support and tools, even though at times it can be a bit destabilizing, from personal experience, I can attest to that. But with the right tools and support, it really can be, profound. We can learn so much about ourselves. We can learn to take care of ourselves in a new way. And I think that's really what this phase is our bodies are calling for a new level of support. And so for many, many years, women were dismissed as, oh, it's just in your head, or you're just getting older, it's stress, or you're all this, oh, we're heading into menopause. But we really didn't fully understand the physical changes that were happening to women's bodies as hormones were erratically declining, as I like to say, without permission, because I don't know what woman's asking for this to happen in this time of their lives. But when we understand what is going on with our bodies, we can really step into that CEO role and get the support that we deserve and really start to implement lifestyle strategies that help us move into that second chapter more strong and more resilient.
I like how you said without permission. That is so good. It's so like, it's going to happen to every woman. I mean, at least we're all in this together,
Yes.
We're all in this together. And I think that's something that's important for you in terms of like having women kind of talk to each other, be able to share their experiences, because as we commiserate together, we learn from each other and we learn how to do this better. How important is it? Because I feel like as a women's health nurse practitioner, speaking to my patients, I'm often trying to get them to like really have this mindset change or a paradigm shift, because I am telling them like, okay, like you know, if you're reaching 50, half your life, more than half your life is over. Like we want to change the mindset of what is the next phase of this life going to look like, and how can you do it graciously and with health and happiness. So how do you talk to women about how mindset is so important at this turn of their life?
I love this question. Thanks for asking. I think the prevailing narrative for so long was that we're on this decline after we get to menopause, and that women were told that there was really nothing that they could do about it. And that is so far from the truth. There's so much that we can do about it. And so, one of the things I always ask my patients is, what would you love? How would you love to feel in the next 30, 90 days, or even a year from now? And also, like, who do you want to be, or who are you stepping into? So I think it's asking those questions that oftentimes no one's ever asked us. Like, I think so often, even my patients, and I'm not sure if you've experienced this as well, they don't even necessarily know what brings them joy. And so as we start to dive in and ask those really important questions, women get clear. I also love to remind women that, man, by the time you're here in perimenopause and midlife, you have lived a life. You have learned so many beautiful lessons, maybe hard-won lessons. You have successes. You have wisdom. And we get to leverage that into the second half of our lives. Doing, maybe it's a career change, maybe it's exploration, or maybe we are, we're anchored to a purpose. And I think it's that reminder that, like, you are resilient and strong, and look how far you've come. Like, this is not the time to recede and decline. This is the time to elevate. And so I think that this is such a beautiful opportunity for us to think of this as an upgrade versus a downgrade.
Yeah, so important. And I think women really need to hear that. We really need to hear that. And I love the phrase wisdom bearing years.
Oh, yeah.
Don't you love that?
I love that because it's true.
Yeah, it's so true. We've had our childbearing years, like you're saying, and then we think, oh, life is just over now because, I can't be childbearing. But no, we can be wisdom bearing, and there can be new birth. There can be new birth
Absolutely.
through wisdom. And I always think to myself, I'm like mentally preparing myself. So I'm 41, but I'm thinking to myself, those young little newly married couples or those new moms, I'm kind of preparing that those will be who I mom, like I can practice and exercise my wisdom and my maternity in my wisdom bearing years in that way. So it's not even that we can't like be mothers. Well, we're going to mother our own children, but it's not that we can't even mother like new forms of this metaphorical child in a sense, we can still be, maternal and help bring life into other young people. And that's what happened in the olden days. Like we lived in villages, like we were all part of each other's community. So that's important. And really even leaning into community and that topic of, why is it important that we know we're not doing this alone? Teresa, you mentioned that. Like, why is that an important piece to this phase of life and even to our mental health, that we're not doing this alone?
Yeah, I love this question too. Thanks for asking, Jamie. We know that the number one predictor for longevity and a healthful life, especially as we move into menopause and beyond, is going to have community. And the quickest way that we see premature aging is when we're struggling with loneliness and isolation. And particularly in perimenopause and even into menopause, especially when women are struggling with things like hot flashes and night sweats and UTIs and frozen shoulder and mood changes like anxiety and depression, it can feel very isolating because we've been told to blame ourselves, or we've been told to feel ashamed of what we're experiencing. The Mayo Clinic just came out with a study that looked at 5,000 women in menopause. And it was like 87% of those women did not seek care. And there was a number of reasons. One of the reasons was that they felt like they were just too busy. Life was happening. They had a lot of priorities and family to take care of, and they put themselves on the back burner. And not, I wouldn't say necessarily consciously, probably unconsciously. Number two was that there was a knowledge gap. They didn't really understand what was going on with their bodies. Maybe they just weren't having hot flashes and night sweats, so they thought it wasn't menopause. They didn't realize that there's like a multitude of 40 plus symptoms that could be related to declining hormones and, shifts in metabolic health and brain health and all of that. And then, but really one of the biggest reasons was that they felt judged by their doctors. In the doctor's office, and they didn't want to feel more shame for what they were experiencing. They were embarrassed and ashamed to go to the doctor's office. And so, when we feel that way, if any of us have ever felt that way, we tend to go inward. And then that leads to more loneliness and not going out. And one of the things that I talk about in the book, it's one of my big pillars, is as comfortable that can be for some of us, it's not going to help us feel like we are that we've got people who have our backs, and so it's so important, particularly when we're going through this, when we feel like we're experiencing cognitive decline, or we are kind of snapping at our kids and our partner, that, or we're forgetting our keys and we don't know why we walked in a room, or all the things that are going on. When you've got friends and colleagues and women that that are going through it with you, she also doesn't remember what her water bottle is called. She doesn't remember where her keys went. And so when you start to compare and you're sharing, what's commiserating, you begin to realize, you're like, oh my gosh, like I am not the only one. Like there's other women going through this with me. And especially when you have friends that feel safe, that are holding space for you, like it changes everything about this journey. And so I think it's important that community be one of the cornerstones, not only for preserving our longevity and our health span, but also just to help us mitigate these symptoms, with more grace and more compassion.
So you, I know, are very aware of what happened 2 days ago
Yes, I
by
am.
the FDA. I saw you had talked about it. We're very excited about it. I mean, I had people texting me like as it was happening. Are you watching this, Teresa? And I was busy in clinic at the time, but I knew it was coming. So I wasn't aware that this change was happening. I am so obviously happy because I have been a proponent of women getting the hormonal support that they need in perimenopause to menopause. So give your perspective on how important it is for women to understand the benefits of hormone therapy, especially as they reach kind of ovarian quiescence, and your perspective on how life-changing this is, that our medical system is now changing its tune instead of a very fear-driven place around hormones to a lifespan, health span driven place in terms of how we approach hormone therapy.
Yeah, I mean, I'm celebrating over here because we're moving in the right direction. The removal of the black box warning is historic and it's long overdue. Like we shouldn't be here to begin with, let alone 20 plus years go by where we have cautious clinicians, misinformation, fear mongering that have left women without access to solutions that could mitigate symptoms and could protect their long-term health. It's been 20 years that women were told hormone therapy was dangerous, largely due to outdated interpretations of the Women's Health Initiative study. But newer, more nuanced research shows that most women, particularly women under 60, I would say even particularly women in perimenopause, well before hormones are bottoming out, that it's not only safe, but it can actually reduce the risk of osteoporosis, heart disease, cognitive decline, and so many other, kind of developing diseases that happen, as we lose these hormones over time. And this is a powerful step forward in terms of evidence-based care, empowering women to explore that they have a lot of other options that they can explore without the unnecessary fear. I know that we still have a long way to go because clinicians, again, there's still a big knowledge gap for many doctors out there, but at least we are now moving forward. And the one thing that I want to really emphasize is that, HRT is not a one size fits all solution for women. particularly women in peri. I always say that who you are at 41 in perimenopause is not who you're going to be at 44 or 46 or 48 or 51. Hormones are going to be continuing to shift and decline and change, and symptoms are going to change as well, potentially. And so you're going to need a more kind of tailored and personalized plan for you based on what you're going through. But this is a step in the right direction. And hopefully, this kind of eases people's minds, clinicians and women alike, that there are more tools in the toolbox for women to thrive instead of suffering needlessly.
Okay, so we just talked about a big, huge news feature in history. So it's about time, like you said, Dr. Snyder, like 20 years too late, sort of thing. But it's happening, so good. Dr. Snyder, if you could wave your magic wand, you wave it, and the next big thing would happen to help women in perimenopause, what would that be?
I think I really spoke into it already, that we are personalizing. Also, I think what I would love to see is that menopause care is more longevity care for women, that we are looking at a woman based on her health span, not just symptom management. Like if I could wave a magical wand, that I would want to be developing protocols to future-proof her health, not just mitigate hot flashes and night sweats and UTIs and vaginal dryness.
Yeah, that's 100%. I totally agree with that. And that's what I say to my patients when I'm counseling them on HRT. I say, hey, listen, I don't want you to just always think about your quality of life. Like I know you have low libido. I know you're concerned about your weight, but I want you to open up your perspective around this, about what this really truly means for your long-term health. Using estrogen and bioidentical progesterone is in some ways the most natural way to keep the body healthy. Because a lot of people are concerned, like, this is a medicine, my body is going to lose its hormones. Why don't I just let that just be? That's the natural state. And unfortunately, we just live so much longer than we did 150, 200 years ago, that we have to think about longevity, as you said. So it's a paradigm shift in the way that we're approaching health. I want to know, because in my practice, people are concerned about a lot of things, but if there's one thing they get most concerned about, it's the metabolic shift. It's the gaining the weight with no reason. It's the feeling like their body is changing, and it's devastating to women who really care about that, right? And they want to look and feel good in their body. So how do you approach this shift in metabolic health for women in perimenopause to menopause?
And I agree with you. This is one of the biggest things that women come to me, because there's nothing more disconcerting than you thinking you're doing all the right things, and yet the weight is piling on. Like it just doesn't, you're like, it's not adding up for me. And it's important for women to know, again, that, blaming ourselves isn't going to get us in the direction that we want to go. But taking ownership is so important here. It's important to note that as hormones are declining, we do see shifts and changes in our metabolic health, not just in muscle loss, but also in body composition changes, the way that we're laying down fat, driving adiposity, particularly in the belly area. We become more insulin resistant, but also other hormones are affecting our sleep and our motivation. Stress isn't doing us any favors. It's driving more cravings, more constant hunger, and more food noise. And so I would say that there isn't one particular hormone or one particular thing that's happening. I find that it's a cacophony of a lot of things that are going on all at once. And to the point of that Mayo study that came out, was that women are not necessarily seeking care because they are taking care of their obligations and their loved ones. Even that is a part of the reason why you're like, I feel this frustration of my gaining weight, and yet I still got to get my kids wherever I need to get them. I still got to do all these things. And so I think it's a multitude of things that are going on that are affecting our metabolic health, but guarantee hormones are a big player here. And when we know that and understand that, we can start to bring on more strategic, basically more strategic health habits and potentially hormones to help mitigate some of that. One of my dear friends, Dr. Susan Gilbert Lentz, was just talking about this yesterday, about how although estrogen therapy isn't a treatment by any means for like prediabetes and diabetes, it can help mitigate by helping to support more insulin sensitivity. Now, it's not the end all be all, but it's a part of one of many tools to help walk back that metabolic dysfunction and that blood sugar deregulation. And so hormones can be a part of the conversation. If declining hormones are the reason why we see more insulin resistance and more, kind of a lay down of fat, let's talk about the possibility of hormones helping to kind of mitigate some of that as well.
So Jamie and I have been working on this course. And so we're excited, as this is an incredible episode with Dr. Snyder around perimenopause. We are focusing on this heavily. And Jamie and I have worked really hard to put a great program together that really walks through pillars of health, including all of the tools that you need to really gracefully walk through perimenopause into menopause. If you go to our website right now, www.hormonegenius.com, you will see the banner to sign up for the course, which is $97. It is a huge value. I cannot tell you how much content is available in this program. So this is the first time we are launching this program. We want you to check it out at hormonegenius.com. The second thing I want to say is that we have a beautiful podcast sponsor, We Heart Nutrition, that has incredible supplements. Jamie and I always appreciate your support also in checking out We Heart Nutrition. I have so many patients that are using their products and are so happy with them. So please get to weheartnutrition.com, check out all of their supplements. You get a 20% off discount using the code GENIUS, off your first order.
All right, awesome. Okay, so we're talking about tools in the toolbox.
Yes.
HRT isn't the only thing, but it's a tool, right, in the toolbox. So what would you say could be another tool? And I'm thinking the mindset around movement. We can kind of really focus in on that. But would you say movement is one of those tools that might move the needle more than we may give it credit for?
Yes, wholeheartedly. I think movement is one of the most important priorities that help us to build resilience, but also help us to build more metabolic flexibility and capacity. And when I'm thinking about movement, I'm thinking about movement from a metabolic standpoint. So there's a couple different buckets we can think about movement. We can or think about, not only movement, but like when we're thinking about muscle as a metabolic sink, muscle in terms of strength, power, and mass, and then muscle in terms of cardiometabolic health. So cardiovascular integrity. And so anytime we're thinking about movement, we are supporting muscle health. And one of the things that a lot of people don't know is that insulin resistance also often starts in the muscle, and then kind of perpetuates throughout the body as well. So anything that we can do to help support that muscle is going to support our metabolic health. So when I think about movement, particularly for, whether it is belly fat, weight gain, insulin resistance, I'm thinking about moving after meals, most importantly. That is going to be one of the biggest game changers. So women always ask me like, well, where do I start? Like life is busy. I've got so much going on. I don't know how to lift heavy. There's a lot of fear around, getting in the gym and just moving after meals, whether that is squats after meals, it's a walk after meals, it's going up and down your stairs after meals. That's going to allow your muscle, which is your glucose sink, to just suck up a lot of that glucose on the back end of that meal without insulin really having to get involved. It's all variable, like how much insulin needs to step in. But when muscle is involved in that kind of reuptake of glucose, we don't necessarily need to involve as much insulin. And unfortunately, insulin is, as much as it's a powerful regulator of our metabolism and our blood sugar, it's also a fat storage hormone. So when we're in a state of hyperinsulinemia, we tend to pile on more fat. And so the more that we can leverage our muscle and movement throughout the day, the more that we can keep insulin at bay, and kind of manage our metabolism a lot more efficiently.
So that's a great tip. I love that one. I do it myself. I tell my patients to do it, walk after, especially your big meals, especially lunch and dinner, and just get a brisk walk in, or the squats are great. I would love to know more. I consider these like kind of like biohacks, in terms of like just other tips that, what other things can we tell women to do? I mean, I notice, Dr. Snyder, your skin is like beautiful. And I'm guessing like you you're probably, I don't know what your age is, but I'm sure you're close to what I am. I'm 50, or maybe you're, I have no idea, but your skin is amazing. So like, what are some other hacks? Maybe skin, maybe just other things to keep your body healthy, nutrition wise. I know obviously you're an essential oil person. Give us some like really fun tips.
I love this question so much. And just to be like full transparency, I'm 46, to kind of give you a sense of where I'm at. So movement, we talked about movement. I love exercise snacks even throughout the day. So punctuating your day throughout the day with movement. And it's not so much for blood sugar regulation, although that is a massive side benefit in terms of your long-term longevity. But I would say for nervous system regulation, sending the brain safety signals throughout the day, whether that is breath work or it's a little meditation. For me, it's walking outside in nature. That is a game changer in its own right. You spoke to us living longer, but also we're living more stressful lives. That is playing a big role here as well. So regulating our nervous system with gratitude practice, with movement, being out in nature, watching sunsets and sunrises, like that, I think the juice is really worth the squeeze there. Also eating, I would say in terms of blood sugar, like strategies, thinking about moving your eating window a little bit earlier. So I'm a big fan of circadian rhythm optimization. I talk a lot about it in my book, The Perimenopause Revolution. And a part of that is, having a circadian fast at night. One of the easiest ways for us to do that, like a 12-hour fast, is going to be eating potentially at before 7 o'clock, ideally. And what I've noticed, I've put continuous glucose monitors on so many patients over the years, is that you could have a super healthy meal. Like last night, we had salmon and roasted broccoli and carrots. And I've put a CGM on it. You could have that same meal at 6 o'clock and blood sugar is pretty stable. Roll yourself to 8:30 that night. Your blood sugar is going to look a little bit different. It's going to be a little bit more deregulated because the later it gets, right? Melatonin is on the rise, cortisol is on the decline. We become more relatively insulin resistant. So if we can eat before 7, we have a 3-hour break between dinner and bedtime routine. That gives us time to digest our food, and we're not on a blood sugar roller coaster heading into bed. Another thing to consider, I think it's important, is to reevaluate the wine down. So maybe wine before bed isn't serving you. Maybe it's potentially messing with your blood sugar. It's messing with your sleep cycle, your heart rate variability, your resting heart rate. And so I tell women, maybe for 30 days, let's just see what happens if we take alcohol out of the equation, in the evening, and see how your sleep improves. Another thing that I think is important is going to be having a metabolically boosting morning routine. So the first thing I do in the morning, unless I'm doing an interview super early, like today, is I just move my body. I go outside. I have grass in the backyard. I ground. I do some squats. Maybe I'll do a little bit of yoga, but I just kind of wake my system up. Then I have my electrolyte water. I've got my coffee with cinnamon, so I don't put sugary creamers or anything in my coffee. I don't want to kick off my day on a blood sugar kind of rampage, and so I'm really mindful. And then I tell my patients to aim for about 25 to 30 grams of protein in the morning, because if we can nail that savory breakfast or that protein forward breakfast, one, we probably are going to make it to lunch without a snack. And we're going to feel more powerful. We're going to feel more energized. We're going to have more capacity to get through our day. So setting the tone of your day with a morning routine that is boosting your metabolism and boosting your cellular energy, I think propels us into a really incredible day and keeps us from getting on that blood sugar roller coaster or that super craving hunger cycle that we can get trapped on even later in the morning.
So important. These are such great tips. It makes me think about this gal I was talking to once, a doctor, a couple years ago. She was talking about how, our society, especially women, we're in sympathetic dominance, where our body is meant to be 80% parasympathetic, 20% sympathetic, meaning most of the time we should be in rest and digest mode, but our body knows to kick in to like fight or flight about 20% of the time. Again, this is kind of a general, stat. But she said, which this is true, and I see it in myself, 80%, it's flipped. 80% of the time we're in sympathetic dominance, and 20% we're in rest and digest. And I think that's so key. What you're saying is, it always seems like the start of the morning, like the very first thing we do, almost sets the tone of the whole day, you know?
Yeah. Oh, yes. There were years where I felt like I was just a Tasmanian devil with lip gloss on. And I read a quote by Louise Hay, and my new book is by Hay House. And this quote changed my entire life because it was a mirror of how I was living. And she said, how you start your day is how you live your day. And how you live your day is how you live your life. And I was like, it was such a mic drop moment for me where I was like, my morning is chaos.
Mm.
And am I surprised that the rest of my day kind of feels like my morning? I'm not gonna lie. And I just was like, okay, I'm gonna anchor myself into habits that not only fuel my energy, but also becoming more intentional about what do I want my day to look like. And I think that same mindset reframe of how we want our day to look like, especially asking yourself that question I talked about earlier, what would you love? What would you love from your day? What would you love to see come of your day? Is it spending more time with your friends? Is it, getting closer to, working towards your mission? You think about your mission. You guys have such a beautiful mission. And every day, I bet you wake up and you're like, okay, how do we get to move this mission forward in a meaningful way that feels good to us?
Mm-hmm.
I think when we get intentional about, what we want our day to look like, we can then extrapolate to what would we love our life to look like? What would we love our purpose and our mission to look like? And I think when we can be driven by purpose, something bigger than ourselves, like a lot of the other pieces come into play a lot easier than we would think.
And I want to follow up with that thought real quick, Teresa. So this idea of, okay, yes, purpose, and it can ground us and it can center us. And I think too, our society, I think about myself personally, I think about how, that Tasmanian devil image is so me too, Dr. Snyder. I mean, especially 10 years ago. And guess what? I had the energy for it. I had the energy
Yeah.
for it. And I was making like progress. And, we're entrepreneurs and we care about health and we have this mission, but we have a family and we're married and we have kids. But it seemed like that's just what you did. And it almost seemed like the messaging back then was, women, you can do it all. You can do it all. Women are just as good as men. We're the same but different, but mostly the same. As in, we can accomplish the same and it's going to look the same. And that's a big fat lie because obviously we have seasons of life and
Yes.
we are different. So I think
Yes.
sometimes we forget, oh, we're not the same, but we are definitely different. So I think the needs for us, and when we pursue that sameness, we are going to burn ourselves out. We will be metabolically unhealthy. We're going to be a Tasmanian devil. Whereas like what you're recommending, Dr. Snyder, is that we will be better for grounding ourselves and taking a deep breath and helping ourselves focus on what we want for the day. That matters so much, especially in this season. So I just want to say I can relate to you in that and how it's in a sense that habit has not served me and how it's like needing to be a rewire in my brain.
You bring up such a good point. And the point that I really wanted to highlight, which was part of what we kicked off earlier today in this conversation, was that perimenopause is that portal. You said 10 years ago, running around like a Tasmanian devil, but you had capacity
Mm-hmm.
and you can negotiate with yourself when you can do it all.
Mm-hmm.
And then we get to perimenopause and we know that we have the capability because we remember ourselves 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 1 year ago, 6 months ago. We remember that version of ourselves. And yet we don't have the same bandwidth and capacity. That begins to shift. And there becomes this identity shift where we really have to look at ourselves. And this is where I think perimenopause is all about discernment. If you
Mm-hmm.
only have so much capacity now, then you really get to decide like what's a full body yes and what's a full body no. What are the boundaries? What are your top priorities? And how do you start to prioritize yourself? And I think this is the superpower of perimenopause is women recognizing how important they are, how important their health is. And that if they don't shore that up and they don't get clear on what are their non-negotiables, it is going to be a bit of a bumpy ride heading into menopause and beyond. And so as much as it's been a little bit of an ego death or an identity shift, all the things, I think it's also such a beautiful blessing because it allows us to get really clear on what matters and what we get to let go of.
One of the things I've been kind of reflecting as this podcast is going on, my mom has had Alzheimer's for, a really long time. She started showing signs when she was in her late 60s. She's 84 now. And it's starting to hit me that, like we don't talk about a lot of things. As a culture, sometimes we just kind of like bottle up and we just like move on and we just don't talk a lot about things. My mom never talked to me about her menopause. My mom suffered a lot. I know, because I watched it. I didn't know what was going on, but I watched her go through hot flashes and anxiousness and weight gain and those things, but we never really talked about it. And I'm just realizing that I guess I think that this is something where we, as we get older, and I'm thinking about my own daughters, like I think we should really start talking about this to the younger generation and how like, yes, maybe there is some sufferings, but in every challenge, like we grow stronger. And every generation we learn more. And I wish I could talk to my mom and ask her, more questions about what it was like and that she could share that wisdom with me. But I can't, because she has something that, of course, a lot of us fear. And I fear it because it appears to run in my family as well. So I know we're kind of tying up here at the end, but is there anything you can say, I guess, about that cognitive decline and what you stress in terms of importance for prevention of dementia, and just also sharing that wisdom of like we need to start talking to the younger generation of what we go through.
I wholeheartedly agree with you. We need to let women not in a place of fear, but a vulnerability of, again, so many women, again, I keep referring back to this study, but I already knew that. I knew because I've seen it so many times in my own practice of women. I'll never forget. I was getting my hair cut a couple of years ago, and there was a woman next to me who was in perimenopause and was just automatically put on birth control pills because that was kind of the gold standard of care. Still is, and hopefully that's going to be changing soon. As we just didn't have research for women in perimenopause. We had it for women in menopause, but even still. 2 years ago, HRT was still a very taboo topic. And she wasn't feeling good. It wasn't helping her because she was dealing with anxiety and sleep issues and a lot of brain and cognitive issues. She wasn't having menstrual cycle issues, and I said, there's other options out there. And she said, well, I'm just going to wait. I'm going to wait. My son's in high school. He's going to graduate in a couple of years. And once he's out of school, I'll look into this. And I thought, but you're suffering now, like significantly. Your quality of life is suffering. And I have a feeling that that's impacting all areas of your life, including your relationships. And it was really kind of, you have these eye-opening moments where you're just having a casual conversation and you realize women are putting themselves on the back burner, or they're not talking about it. I think that especially moms, I think there's a lot of moms here in this conversation today that, we don't want our kids to worry. We don't want to burden our children or our friends or our people. And I think that's a narrative that we were taught that isn't serving anybody. We need to be having these conversations so that women get the care that they deserve. And that so that we could have been looking at those biomarkers for your mom in a more meaningful way when she was in her 40s and her 50s. And so I think the more that we're talking about this, the more that women know, like, oh, in my mid 30s, I should just be paying attention. I should be getting a timeline of labs. I should be tracking my menstrual cycle because it's a monthly report card. The more that women begin to understand what their baseline is, what their normals are, then they begin to recognize, oh, this isn't my normal. I'm changing. I don't feel like myself anymore. Because we're having these conversations, I think there's more women becoming aware of what's going on with their bodies and recognizing that, yes, they do deserve a new level of support as they navigate these changes, particularly for cognitive decline. I know you know this, both of you probably, but 67% of dementia patients are women. And there is a window of vulnerability in perimenopause and menopause that put us at greater risk due to declining hormones. Yes, there's genetic predispositions and there's lifestyle risk factors as well, but hormones are a big player here too. And if we could be looking at this information at a woman's labs and her hormones in a more meaningful way, we could probably prevent a lot of these dementia cases from happening. And so I just wanted to highlight, the more that we talk about this, the more that women can get the care that they deserve.
So true. And it's, we're going up against the metaphorical man. When I say the man, have you guys seen School of Rock? Have you
Yes.
seen that with
Yes.
Jack Black? He's like, the man. I feel like that's what it is. It's like we're fighting the man, but the more the man gets questioned and the more the quote unquote man gets new information, and there's a tidal wave of women who are saying we want better, we want more. Until that happens, we can just we're just bypassed, and here's the birth control pill and move on your way. But again, with the big news of the reversal of the black box warning and all of this, again, we're in the midst of a change right now,
Yeah. A
which is
change
so
that women
empowering.
are demanding. The only
Exactly.
reason why the FDA is removing that black box warning is that the collective voices of millions of women are demanding that that happen. That is the reason why this is happening. It is that tidal wave of women demanding to be heard and validated and having solutions. All vaginas need estrogen because
Yeah.
we've got to be able to, vaginal atrophy, UTIs, vaginal dryness, like painful, all of it. This is happening to a majority of women in menopause. And we know that UTIs, especially recurrent UTIs, are a reason why women end up in assisted living facilities. And then osteoporotic fractures, again, another reason why women end up in assisted living facilities. Both of these things, hormones could have mitigated. And so I just wanted to point that out, that it's because of women that we're seeing these changes.
I love that. So good. That's like a perfect ending to this episode. Women, we have a voice, and the voice does matter. And we're seeing how our voice does change the course of care that we're receiving. So praise the Lord for that. Okay, so this was awesome, Dr. Snyder, of course. I didn't expect any less. It was wonderful. We covered so much ground. We talked about the mindset and kind of looking for that new opportunity, of this shift, this new season, this wisdom bearing years. We talked about strategies to help support our body, our metabolic health, and we went into a lot of all that. And I'm sure, many of our listeners are wondering, how is Dr. Snyder going to answer this last question we ask every interviewee? But what do you wish every woman knew about her hormone genius?
Mm. That her hormones are her superpower. Our hormones are master regulators of almost every organ system of the body, including our brain and our metabolic health and just our aliveness. I think sometimes we make hormones the villain when they really are here to protect us and help with cellular communication. And so that is the message I want to leave women with, especially if you were brought up thinking that your hormones were not in your favor. They really are doing the best they can with what they have in the moment that they're in. And that's important for us to know.
All right. Well, tell us about how all of the listeners can, find your content. Tell us about your books and all of your social media handles. I'm sure after this episode, a lot of people will be interested.
Yeah, I have a new book out, The Perimenopause Revolution, and it's available on audio. I read the book, and the reason why I say that is if you're a busy perimenopausal mom or midlife mom like me, if you want to consume content, it's got to be audio. Hence why we're on this podcast right now.
Totally.
And it's so if you go to Spotify too, if you have a premium account, you can listen to the book for free. I think it's up to 15 hours. And I think the book clocks in around that. It's on Audible. So I just wanted to share. And the reason why I'm sharing is it's selling 2-to-1 audio to hardcover. But it's available in all formats. And if you want all the bonuses, including more recipes, more workout videos, exercise snacks, a complete lab reference guide, symptom tracker, menstrual cycle tracker, sleep routine, morning routine. I mean, name it, everything, mindfulness strategies. All of that is at Dr. Mariza, drmariza.com/book. You get the book, put your name and email in, and I will deliver those to you instantaneously because I believe women deserve all of it, not just the least of it. We deserve the full solution. And you can find me on my podcast, Energized with Dr. Mariza, and on Instagram at Dr. Mariza.
Awesome. Well, this was totally great. I am so glad you did the Audible because I have no time to read books. I learn everything through audio, so I will be checking that out. So thank you so much for being with us, Dr. Snyder. This was an incredible episode.
Thanks for listening to the Hormone Genius podcast. Please remember to share our podcast with your friends and family, and also follow us on social media. If you were not aware, we have a YouTube channel. So if you could like and subscribe to our YouTube channel to stay in the loop with all of our latest episodes, we would appreciate that. Thank you so much for your support. We are excited to journey alongside you as you discover the beauty and the genius of your hormones.